Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Emily Hiles, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Joanne Davey. This evening, we are honoured to acknowledge Lieutenant General Robert Skinner, Director of the Defence Information Systems Agency and Commander of the Joint Force Headquarters, Department of Defence Information Network, United States of America, accompanied by Major General Warren Gould, Head of the Cyber Operations Division and Strategic J6. We also warmly welcome the Australian Defence Force and New South Wales Police Women's Australian Rules football teams. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is dirt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Richard Winstanley Adams. Richard Winstanley Adams was born in 1893 in Narrabri, northern New South Wales, the second son of Richard and Charlotte Adams. Richard attended Narrabri Public School. He later moved south to Gunnedah, where he worked as a farmer. In December 1915, Adams volunteered for service in the Australian Imperial Force. He joined the newly raised 34th Australian Infantry Battalion. With these men, he undertook initial training in Australia before sailing to England in May 1916 on board the transport ship Hororata. In England, the unit continued training for 5 months before sailing for France in November 1916. The winter of 1916 to 1917 was the coldest in decades in northern France. The men of the 34th Battalion spent time in billets near the city of Armentières, close to the Belgian border. They also spent time in frontline trenches. No major battles took place during winter, but while in the trenches, the men endured German artillery barrages, snipers, machine gun fire, gas attacks, and raiding patrols. In the middle of 1917, British commanders turned their attention away from the Somme River sector and towards the border of France and Belgium. They planned a major offensive aimed at capturing the higher ground outside the town of Ypres in Belgium. The first step in this campaign was to capture the ridge line outside the town of Messines to the south. In preparation for the assault on Messines, British, Canadian and Australian soldiers had dug mines underneath the German positions and filled them with explosives. Just after 3 a.m. on the 7th of June 1917, these explosives were detonated and the Allied soldiers charged the German lines. Those in Adams' company remembered him going over the top and into no man's land on the morning of the attack. He was killed in action during the charge. The men with him had varied recollections. Some said he was killed by machine gun fire, some by a shell fragment. Richard Adams was 23 years old. Adams' remains were buried where he fell, but in the subsequent fighting, the location of his gravesite was lost. His name appears on the Menin Gate Memorial in Ypres, alongside more than 54,000 Commonwealth troops who were killed in Belgium during the war and whose burial places are unknown. Here in Australia, Private Richard Winstanley Adams is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Richard Winstanley Adams, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we the left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget,
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozier or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.